Welcome back to the Keep Going podcast with Vin Kennedy. I'm your host, Vin Kennedy. Today we have a special guest. This is Matt. Matt, you want to do a brief intro on yourself?
Yeah, my name is Matt Minard, pronounced Minard because I'm a nerd. And I'm just a lifetime kind of fitness enthusiast and helper of people. And my main way of doing that is through physical therapy. And like a lot of people, I started running for the physical benefits, just not get fat or lose some weight. And I kept with it for the mental. So I've been a physical therapist for 10 years, but the last 3 years, I've really just kind of hyper focused on helping runners because I know what it's like to have running and to not have running is a part of my whole, mental, physical health. And when the pandemic started and so many people out there had nothing to go to, everything was shut down. All they had was running, hashtag running's not canceled. I just felt like there was a greater need out there. And so slowly but surely over the last 3 years of just thinking like a scientist and running my own experiments and producing content and learning, and just kept asking myself, how can I lean this out? How can I whittle this down to be as simple as possible for myself, but also then how can I transfer these skills to somebody else so they don't need a doctorate degree, they don't need years and years of working on this. So that's really been my mission, is just helping people run smarter, safer, and faster. My thing is, no matter what your reason is for running, I want to just make sure that you can do it safely and not get injured. So that's my thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And if you had to sum it up in one sentence, what is the PT approach to running?
So it is kind of separate, like the physical therapy world and more performance world. Like typically in the role as a physical therapist, it's rehabilitation, meaning there's some kind of an injury or something that's affecting their life or their quality of life, and we have to work towards that goal of getting them back. Where it gets a little bit tricky is there's a lot of people out there that need help that aren't quite injured, or they don't qualify, or their insurance. So that's kind of why for the last year, I stepped away from patient care of seeing people that were already injured and then trying to work backwards and try to clean up the mess, versus being proactive is a lot more rewarding. Is how can I get people this information before they get injured. That way we don't have to even deal with that. But typically in the rehabilitation world, someone comes in with, let's say, knee pain. First thing we want to do is kind of figure out, get a good history. What's going on? How long have you had it? What's the location? What are the pain patterns? What makes it better? What makes it worse? And just in my head, I kind of create this list of things that it could be based off of asking questions. And then through the physical exam, where I'm looking at the range of motion of the knee, the hip, the ankle, just testing all sorts of other factors to look for differences side to side or any major weaknesses. And we kind of put those pieces together of that list that I formulated in my head. And once we get that causation, or we kind of know what's going on, then we work backwards. Okay, what's causing this? Why is your knee hurting? Most of the time, there wasn't a one-time incident. They didn't get hit in a sport. They didn't fall off a curb. It was like, I don't know, it just slowly came on. So that also helps us in our clinical decision-making of what's going on. But then if we don't remove or address what caused this in the first place, it's just going to keep going on. So I like to think of a combination of active and passive strategies. Active is where the patient is doing the work to help heal. Like I say, as a physical therapist, I'm just your body's tour guide. Your body can heal itself. It just has to have the right environment. So I want to have a combination of active strategies, but also passive can be helpful, like dry needling, soft tissue work, manipulation. All those things can have a place to treat some symptoms. But if we're not addressing the causation, then we're kind of doing a disservice. So usually my goal is 1 to 3 sessions where we're kind of figuring this out, explaining what's going on, having the patient be an active part of the rehabilitation, what signs to kind of look for, how to dosage their running, just to see how can we get them back on track and get their knee first feeling better, but then how can we integrate that with the whole body of how it moves, get a history of what else do you like to do through the week? Because some people might not think that playing basketball twice a week and running, if they're getting all these impact sports where I think about gravity and tissue loading all day, every day, most normal people don't. So unless they don't really put that 2 and 2 together, like, oh, I didn't realize that all that loading is also contributing. How can we formulate a plan and some guidelines to kind of dose back into it and let the body adapt? So, but then that's where performance comes in, is where we try to take in physical therapy. It kind of stops when you're kind of back to baseline. And some people, that baseline might be better than they were off before, but that performance. People want to get faster. They want to see progress. They want to feel like they're actually making changes. And it's really, really rewarding and powerful for someone to run a mile without walking for the first time, or run, the longest distance. So giving somebody that tool or outlet. But that's where, as a physical therapist, my number one concern is safety above all, where rehabilitation or performance coaches, they're more like, let's just get faster as fast as possible. But that does sometimes come with injury. So I kind of play the role of wearing two hats of rehab and performance, and we can get there. It's just there's an order of operations where we can't skip this step and just go to there. So that's typically what the physical therapist role with an injured runner is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you hit on something that I think is so important. And it's something that's, like you said, it's just the norm now where somebody has a nagging injury and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, my knee just clicks. Like that's just, oh, it doesn't move that way, or like I don't move that way, or that's just how that is. And I feel like that's the norm now. But like, what's a really common thing that you would see or people kind of just live with as runners?
I would say the knee issues is the most common. I've kind of whittled down to three efficient learned skills that no matter who you are, these are three skills that you need to learn that your body won't just do automatically. And the most common of those is bounding or jumping, kind of blending this moving forward, but also going up, and teaching people to just move horizontal when they leave the ground and not leave the ground and go up and then come down. Because to do that requires the knees to work as the engine and the quads. We're getting a lot more hang time, air time. Higher you go, further you come down, the more force that they're dealing with. So teaching people how to move horizontally is a huge piece, but knee pain is number one. All common injuries, that's mainly what we see. But just kind of teaching people that it doesn't really have to be like that. And sometimes when you had it going on for a while, people just, especially running is hard and difficult. So we have to push through some of those barriers. So we get used to pushing through and being resilient. But there's some things that we need to actually respect a little bit more. But I think some people just get that mindset, like, which isn't bad, like nothing's going to stop me. But just being a little more aware of or in tune with the body, that way it doesn't force you to stop. And if you address it early enough, and it's hard to be proactive, but if you can address it before it happens, we don't have to take that time off. And thinking big picture view, zoom out. I want to see you running for 6 months, a year, 5 years, not just for 6 weeks and just rushing to do it. So the body doesn't care what your agenda is. It doesn't care when your race is. It has its own healing time frame. And those are things that people, I guess, just need to have a little bit better of understanding. And I think we talked a little bit before age. Like I find my demographics, the people that find my stuff valuable are either like 30 to 55 years old, and they understand the value of movement, and we only have one body your whole life, and it's great. It's amazing we can heal, but it's still, you've only got one body. And so they appreciate the value of technique and movement more. Or the people that are injured. And that's usually like the 20 to 30 range. Then they find it valuable. They realize, oh, I didn't realize there's more to this than just going out and go. Yes, most people can just go out and run, but 99.9% of people, they're not going to be doing what's most efficient or safe because of those three skills. And that's why I'm just making my mission to try to like, how can we incorporate this into gym classes or like at a younger age, and how can we just get this information out there, which is simple stuff. That way it doesn't get to that point. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you kind of wanted to get right into like a watch runner, I know that's one of your things. If you kind of want to just touch on that.
yeah, so like a lot of people, so based with that jumping, so if I'm standing still and I want to go up, I would, crouch down. I'd use my legs, my arms, and I would have my arms go up, my legs would go up. But when we're running forward, and I think of terms of arrows and directions, I like thinking about paying on the principle. Going forward and running is the principle. The money that you're expending towards that principle is like energy. If you're not using energy that's not helping you go towards that principle moving forward, it's like paying on the interest. So going up and down or picking the feet up and down is inefficient because it's paying on the interest. The energy that it takes to move the body higher than your height. And this is where I had an aha moment. I'm 6'1". I should be able to run in a room with a ceiling height that's 6'1". you see some up and down happen, but that's all occurring below my height when I'm cushioning and landing. But I don't want to run and bonk my head on that ceiling and go all the way up, because that multiplied times thousands of steps, just like a 30-year mortgage, 1% on the interest can add up big time. So a Baywatch runner is a form of that same exact thing of doing too much up and down. And like when they run in the water, there is resistance. They do need to pick their feet up, but there's no water on land. We don't need that resistance. We don't need to do the extra work. The other kind of analogy that I like to use for this whole thing that kind of correlates with the Baywatch runner as well is if I'm in a canoe and that represents my body, how I move forward is I have a paddle that's like my leg. I put the paddle in the water and I push the water backwards. That's what moves me forward. I don't then need to take that paddle all the way up out of the water every time. I can glide, I can keep it low. So if you notice people when they walk, their feet stay really low to the ground. It should go, the faster that you run, the feet will start to go higher off the ground in the back end. But where we get into trouble is people try to emulate these mechanics of running really, really fast at slower speeds. And it's just incredibly inefficient. And if you're a long distance runner, that's where it just adds up. So the Baywatch runner is just a form of visualizing, seeing the one silly classification of how people run. And I have, when I teach my courses, I have three main classifications where I'll video somebody and then I put them through these efficiency checkpoints to see pass, fail. And the three that I'm looking for is one, the bounding, excessive vertical motion. The second is braking, is somebody slowing themselves down. That's also known as overstriding, but overstriding is ambiguous and doesn't give us a whole lot of information, versus braking is slowing down. And then twisting. So twisting, braking, and bounding, those are the three like big classifications. And sometimes people can fall into all three of them. But then for Instagram, for other ways to relate to people, I'll kind of have other different, silly kind of things to classify. But Baywatch running is essentially a bounder, or someone that's doing too much vertical and paying high on the interest rates.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny because I've worked with a couple of running coaches myself, and I know a couple of friends who've worked with running coaches as well. And the one thing that I expected off the bat, and it's never happened with any coach I've had, and I know it's not really the norm, is like I thought I would have sent a video and like some form would have been critiqued, but it seems it's more of like, oh, your body just kind of finds the most efficient way, but obviously that's not always the case.
Yeah, there's a common misconception that the body will take the path of least resistance, but it won't do what's most efficient. If I drop something on the ground, and if it's really light, like a pen, I don't need to have like deadlifting kind of pose and use all these muscles that I don't really need. It's easier for me just to let gravity bend at my back, let gravity do the work, and use my back to lift up. That's the path of least resistance. It's super easy to do that. And we're not using muscles to do that. We're just using the ligaments and the joints and gravity. But that's not what's most efficient for your body, stressing like that. So people do, I think it's an old thing where if you just don't know what to look for, you don't know what's going on, we just brush it off of, oh, it's not a big deal. But that's where I think the pandemic, I was already into, working on running mechanics a lot because there's so little out there, but that's what really made me hyper focus on it. But there was a time early in my practice where I didn't look into mechanics as much, but then you just realize like the causation of a lot of this stuff, it's so important of how we move. So video is, I just did a post about this today of, what you think you look like when you're running. And I had this beautiful woman on the beach running, and then like what you actually look like in some silly kind of running forms, because it's true. I had people come in the clinic when I was treating, and they were maybe saw my Instagram. They know some of the push with the tush. They know the saw arms forward and back, not the axing up and down. And then we video them and they look, and I don't even have to say anything. They're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was doing that. We get so much value in videoing, especially in slow motion, whether you're learning how to deadlift, how to squat, really any technique, but especially running. We need feedback to learn, and visual feedback is extremely valuable and important. So I do have, and I can send it to you, a free how to video yourself on a treadmill or outside with step-by-step tripod. They're cheap. It's the best investment you can make. but just videoing yourself, and you can get so much good feedback by that. Oh, I didn't realize that my head was out forward. I didn't realize that I thought loose hands, but actually my wrists were floppy. I actually had my wrists were flopping all over the place. So you can learn so much by videoing yourself in slow motion.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then one thing too that I know you touch on a lot is like treadmill versus outdoor running. And what's your like take on that?
I think the biggest things is, I kind of go for, are we teaching someone the technique of how to move, or are we actually training, working on actually performance, or yeah, those are the main things. I think the treadmill is a great way to actually have a softer surface, like the cement or the road. Every action equal and opposite reaction. There's not a whole lot of forgiveness. A treadmill that's built in, there is more forgiveness. Just like if I were to have a punching bag and punch a softer surface versus a cement wall, the cement wall has zero give to it. So treadmill belt does offer a lower impact environment for people. I like the treadmill for working on pacing and correlating heart rate zones, where I know if I hit 7 miles per hour or an 830 pace, hold on to it. What's my heart rate do? What zone am I in? And starting to correlate so I know my paces, know my speeds. The way when it comes to running outside, I don't even have to look at my watch. I just know my body, know what's under the hood. It's the treadmill can be like a speedometer just to give you some insight and correlate. So I really like it for that. I really like it for doing working on pacing. I'll put the treadmill at 7 miles per hour and say, okay, I don't want you to do 8, 9 miles per hour of work. I want you to do just enough work to keep up with this treadmill belt, no more and no less. And then we can get the immediate feedback of the sound. The louder it is when they run, when they hit the treadmill, the more impact that they're doing. And as long as that impact is happening at lower speed, or a lot of times we'll see high impact at low speeds, and that's where we get into trouble. People are pounding. So the one thing I don't like the treadmill for, the main thing for teaching, is the biggest way to teach somebody not to jump in this moving horizontal is I'm teaching them to push the world backwards, just like that paddle in the water, pushing the water back. If I'm trying to teach somebody to push backwards on a belt that's also moving backwards, it's really challenging to get that sensation of push forward propulsion. And also just if someone's trying to train for a race and they do all of their training on a treadmill and they're used to that softer surface, once it goes to race day, when they go to cement, their tissue adaptation hasn't really happened. So it's a lot more injurious for people. That's why I kind of recommend, if you're running just for fitness or mental health, you could be fine just doing a treadmill always. But if your goal is to run a race, you should be incorporating or kind of going more to the outside realm. But you can still sprinkle in some treadmill in that, but not full treadmill if you're running a race outside.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Have you heard of the skill mills, which is like the treadmill where you push yourself?
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
they're interesting. They're good on some aspects, like they force you to push back because you're the
Right.
engine. But the curve of them and where your height, height of the runner, the length of their legs, where that actually occurs, it can sometimes be awkward, and you can have to shorten up your stride and have to take a higher step rate as a result. But naturally, people do jump less on them, but it still doesn't always affect the posture. But no, I think it's a good alternative. It's really hard to keep that same pace and same speed, but that could correlate to just another skill. But yeah, they're cool, they're different. But I think as far as learning that one skill, that's where a treadmill could be beneficial if you're using one of those versus just a traditional motor belts that are doing the work for you.
Yeah. It seems like there are benefits, but again, nothing really kind of is as effective as just being outside, especially if you're going to race outside. And
Yeah.
then what are your takes on heel striking? Because a lot of people talk about, where to land on your foot when you're landing.
Yeah. I think that I talk about it, really what it's all about is our center of mass. Where's my center of mass? And our goal is when we move forward to land and load our body weight through the ground as close to our center of mass as possible. So instead of focusing on the where the foot's landing, by focusing on the posture, I'll do this thing where I'll look at someone run from the side view and I look at their torso and think of that like an hour hand of a clock. If they're running at this 12 o'clock posture, meaning they're not leaning at all, their weight's back, they're going to land on their heel out in front of their center of mass, which is most important. It's where is it in relationship to their body, not what part of the foot. Conversely, if someone's leaning forward at the 1 o'clock position and they're hinging at the hips, their center mass is back. So they're going to land on their heel and be forced to land and load in front of their body. But if you have that skill too, the proper leaning forward, hinging at the ankles, landing on your heel is not only safer, it's more efficient. Try to like walk and land on something other than your heels. It's super, you're shortening up your stride. And that's where I had some aha moments, just reverse engineering the direction of running, walking, sprinting. It's all moving forward. Our muscles don't know the difference. When they contract, they shorten, they're just being used. So we can actually learn a lot from how to move at faster speeds. And landing on your heel is recommended as long as you have that proper lean, which with the proper lean, that keeps your center of mass in more of an optimal location to be able to land. And it's going to be natural that you're going to land on the heel. And I talk to people, don't focus on the landing. You can only think about one thing. Our mind can only focus on one thing. Think about the ground. Think about pushing the ground back. Roll the earth backwards. Don't think about the landing. The landing is going to take care of itself. But if you're focused on the landing, usually people are going to be not leaning, or they're just going to be picking their feet up, versus we get most of our power. It's just like if I was teaching that person how to paddle in the water, if they were just so hyper focused on where they place that paddle in the water, versus instead just think about that pushing back. That's where we get our propulsion. That's where you get your power. So focusing on that as opposed to the landing. But heel striking is 100% safe when you have the proper posture and lean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see with myself, especially with the super shoes, like, I'll wear Vaporflies and I feel it. And like you said, you kind of break yourself when you're not landing on your heel. Of course, it has to be with an efficient lean, and it has to be, in the proper alignment with, not too far out in front of your body and all of that. But yeah, I've seen that. And I feel like, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Sometimes there's almost like an information overload, right? Where it's like, too much that it's almost like detrimental.
Yeah,
I
it's
want to know how you,
paralyzing by the possibilities, just too much information. And that's
yeah.
why I focus on the 3 skills in order, and we don't do more than one. Sometimes we get excited. We want to teach more than one skill at a time. And here's a good thing for you and your listeners. One of the things, if I had to pick, and I just did an episode on this on my podcast, there's a technique called the tennis ball necklace, where I take a tennis ball, I cut 2 slits in it, fill it with pennies, put it around a shoelace, wear it around your neck where the ball is at your belly button, and just giving you the one cue. I want you to run forward and keep the ball as quiet and as still as possible. If they're doing these jumping or going up and down, if they're Baywatch running, that ball is going to be so loud going up and down. It's going to come back and hit them in the stomach. And it's so cool to see, instead of giving 3 separate cues, just giving that one cue, what things will change, and then mimic the mechanics. I want you to run the same with the ball on or off. We're actually doing research where I went to PT school. We're going to do a study where we have 10 subjects. They run, we get all their data, and then put the tennis ball necklace on, collect that data, and just see what the differences are. But that's been one of the most powerful tools that I've been using for the last couple of years, just to give people that feedback of auditory feedback and tactile feedback if the ball is hitting you. If you don't want to video yourself and get that visual feedback, but feedback is so important. But also when we give the feedback is also extremely important. If you're videoing yourself and watching it after the fact, it's still helpful, but you don't get that real time feedback where you can really then make changes. And that's how learning actually occurs, is when we get that feedback in the moment. But then we can't always have that tennis ball necklace on. We need to not rely on it. We have to also learn to kind of take the feedback away, so we don't have to rely on that.
Yeah, no, that's honestly, that's a really impactful exercise, only because, like you said, you kind of take care of the little things without too much fixation on one thing. Yeah, for sure. You took
Yeah.
like the thinking out of it for sure. And I'm reading Steve Magnus's book, Do Hard Things, and he talks about like zooming in or zooming out while running. And I'm curious for yourself, or even what you tell your runners. So like, I know in a marathon sometimes a lot of people say like the first 6 miles flies by, so they kind of zoom out. And then, you get in the suck, which a lot of people say it starts at mile 18 or 20. And for that last 6 to 8 miles, you're really zoned in. Is there anything that you teach mindset wise?
I think that's really important. With my own life, I find this kind of zoom out, big picture view versus zoom in and the details. But I like to think about, if we're going to be zooming in, it's more we're hyper focused. We're focused on the right thing, but not over analyzing all these little details. So I do teach more just kind of big picture, like trying to like remove yourself from your body, and just some
Right.
of the, David Goggins stuff, or when you feel pain, asking yourself, what is pain? This isn't pain. And just kind of having that out of body experience and not feeling what you're feeling in your body. Yeah, just more mindset stuff. And I think even not just running, with everything in life, just having that zoom out, big picture things, little things that we think bother us, when we kind of just zoom out or take this outside perspective. I found that mindset to be extremely helpful with anxiety, just day-to-day stuff. But yeah, applying that to running, which is just a time where things are going to be difficult, like anything in life, but this is more physical and mentally difficult. So just using some of those same strategies in all those different books can be extremely helpful.
Yeah. It's funny too, because I feel like obviously we sign up for these races. We know that mile 21 marathon is most likely not going to feel good, especially if you're going after a time goal. And we forget that. Like I feel like you get in and you're like, oh, this sucks. And it's like, well, you're running quick paces and you're 21 miles into a 26-mile race. This isn't supposed to feel good. But it's
Yeah.
often it's easy to forget for sure.
Yeah. I think, like, the whole just embracing the suck and knowing that what doesn't, diamonds have to harden. You just have to go through some stuff to get through the other end, and doing things that you don't want to do is what actually makes you feel alive and growth. And that's where all the growth occurs. But I think sometimes ignorance is bliss, and not knowing, or you kind of know, but don't focus on it. But then when it comes, just kind of like just finding ways or strategies to grind through. So I definitely use all those strategies too in the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a good time to kind of spin it off into like obviously you went from being a steady PT, not, almost I want to say safety in a way and comfort, and you kind of just completely spun off and did your own thing here. What was that like? How was navigating that? And what kind of things did you tell yourself to keep that all in perspective?
So I kind of like, it got to a point where I felt like, when I started going online and started the Instagram and started just reaching more people, and like in my mind, it's always been just helping people. And then I'm like, how can I help more people? And I got to the point where I felt like I could be more effective and reach more people by teaching the masses or teaching the teachers. So it's kind of like anything. You go into it with just like, my still that just one driving goal is, how can I get better? How can I reach more people? And then just kind of naturally evolves from there. But like, if anything new, it can just learning new skill sets. In physical therapy school, we don't learn audio, media, storytelling, simplification, how people learn, how we can teach more effectively, just resistance of people in general with any new idea, and anything online. But it's been a great growth. It's like being able to look back and see all the different skills and things that I've learned has been really helpful. But just like with everything, and me personally, I'm such an extrovert person, where I get so much of my energy and my purpose from being around others, and feeling and being helpful, and kind of having to take a step back temporarily to try to build it in such a way where you don't need me there, so I can kind of reach the masses more. It's been difficult, but I've needed that. I kind of was at a point where I've done, all the certifications, and just it just got to the point where I needed another challenge, and I saw an opportunity where I'm like, there's no one else really doing this. I'm passionate enough about it. I know it's not going to be easy, and that's where, I've been listening to so many different audiobooks and podcasts as well about just, mindset and growth, and just how can I prepare myself mentally for this road, because it isn't easy. And just like with everything, there's certain things in life that we're used to, 100 comments, 99 of them positive, one negative. It's our human instincts to just focus on that one negative, and finding ways to like kind of evolve or level up in your thinking, and how to not focus on that. So that's been really helpful, as far as just, thinking more business like, being more stoic sometimes when you need to be. But yeah, just like with anything new, it's comes with a lot of challenges, but a lot of growth. Um, so yeah, I'm not done, but I just keep kind of pushing forward and trying not to let anything slow me down.
Yeah. And how long have you been at this?
So I've been a practicing physical therapist for 10 years, but at year 9, that's when I left patient care. Like, I'll still see like one or two people a week here and there. Especially for the dry needling. I just can't get people off of it. but mainly just for the last April 1st of 2022 was my day one of just all in with, human movement optimization is my business name. And I want to start with running, learn to run, but eventually I have plans for learn to squat, learn to deadlift, learn to whatever, from a movement technique perspective. And I have courses out there for other physical therapists to give them the education to kind of include this into their repertoire. Other ideas for like cross country and how I can kind of scale it. I went to my sister's, she's a cross country coach, and I had like 30 kids, just me, and I can't wait to get help from other people. But I had 30 kids lined up in order, had a tripod set up in a runway in a parking lot, and said, go. And once the one person passed, the next person ran, and videoed them all at one time in slow motion, taught them the 3 skills of swinging the arms forward and back, leaning forward, hinging at the ankles, and how to glide, that moving horizontal, and then retested, refilmed. And then we can kind of break it up into different groups. This group, you guys focus on this skill for now. This group, you focus on here. Once you pass this, we can move on. So just kind of making a system at it. So that's really what I've been doing. But I'm at the point now where everything is kind of made and ready to go. So it's just a matter of like getting the word out. But I spent a lot of time just building systems and programs and things and ways to not need me, how can I have this be such a way that I don't need to be a part of the process? Or if I do, it's just a very, very short amount of time. So yeah, it's been 14 months or so.
I feel like it's an overlooked place in fitness right now where there's a lot of people either in pain or just obviously in today's society, a lot of people are obese and just sedentary. So a lot of people are just sitting around and getting pain from that. And again, it's just pain they live with. And taking that almost the PT approach to fitness to just like, oh no, I feel good again. I can move again. And I'm not sure if you've heard of Active Life. I'm actually in the process of beginning to work with them as well, and that's what they do as well. Are you familiar with them?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'll shoot them
It's
notes.
that's like one of those things that the two words, so common words, active and then life. There's so many, maybe I have, but there's just so many things out there. But I think anything that just gets people moving. And I think it's that when we aren't moving, we get this mindset where we think we shouldn't move because we hurt, but actually that's the thing that's going to make you feel better by moving. And so creating a structure or an avenue or a path for people to be able to actually do that. Because, emotion follows motion, and movement is medicine, and nothing good comes from just kind of sitting around from a mental and a physical standpoint. So anything that is helpful of getting people moving, I'm all for.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And what keeps you going? Like, what's your why? I know you kind of touched on it, but
Yeah, my why is knowing that there's somebody out there that is struggling, that thinks there's no way they could run. They thought they'd never be able to run. They're not a runner. They've gained weight through COVID. They've have the sedentary job. They're sitting around. They don't have structure. They never even exercised before because they haven't thought. They think they need all this equipment or whatever. It's the people that that are like me that just need movement. So either getting people to do something they've never done before and empowering them to progress, or the people that are running as their everything and they're injured and they just can't seem to stay healthy, and allowing them to be able to do what they love and giving them that outlet. So that's really what kind of keeps me going, is just, I feel like there's, a larger than life, like this is greater than me kind of concept. Like a lot of people, you have to like, it's not about me, it's about them, and how can I work and be of service. So that's really what it is for me, is just how can I get people back to doing something that they love and they need, or doing something new they never thought they could do. That's my driving force.
and last question, when you were thinking of kind of making the whole move from being a PT, you know, almost regularly to kind of making the jump into social media and creating what you're creating now, what's advice that you would now go back and tell yourself?
That's a good question. I would say, uh, especially for me, like I experienced this a little bit in the beginning of the pandemic. I didn't realize how much of my self-worth that I put into being a physical therapist and treating people. Like it's not just a job for me, like it's what part of what makes me feel whole. In the beginning of the pandemic, when I worked for a large hospital system, we were kind of shut down and we had to do these random jobs that weren't physical therapy. I started to feel things I've never felt before. You know, like you go through school, you've got a mission, you're a student. There was always like something to go towards for growth. And then to not have that and to have like not be able to do what I do. I think I got to a point where I was on such a high and feeling so good where I had, you know, the business and the Instagram and all that was still going and going strong. And I was working full time. But I kept thinking, you know, I just want to be able to put all my energy into this. But I wish I would have known, like knowing that part of what makes me feel me and whole is treating people. Just know it's not gonna be great all the time. You know, like I'm just not a work at a computer by myself. Even it's not the same as YouTube or Insta. There's not that connection. So I wish I would have. And I just continue to know that like this is just a temporary thing. It serves a greater purpose, but you're not going to feel awesome like yourself all the time because we're removing that part of what really makes you feel whole.
Yeah, no, it's important. I feel like a lot of people are kind of in that position, especially like I don't know if it's this generation, but there's the fixation of like working for the same place for 30 years and then retiring and enjoying 10 to 15. It's just people aren't doing it anymore. And
Yeah.
you're either switching jobs or trying to become whatever. But it's funny, and it's a lot of people have the desire to not do it as well and are just scared to take the jump.
Yeah, I think that's why like our parents and all they just don't understand it. Like what why? Because the same, I come from all that 30 years, 40 years, and I almost like good for them if they can do that. I just it got to
Yeah.
the point where I couldn't, and it's good and bad with everything. The more possibilities you have, it just gets to a point where you're like, I don't feel like I have any more growth, or I know that I can do more. Or I can't see myself doing this same exact one thing forever. I want to expand, I want to grow, but it is scary and it is a big jump. But there's so many different books out there and listening to podcasts of people that have been through it and just getting that perspective and learning, you know, what makes you tick, what just more about self growth. Just like, you know, we all, I think, at some point get on that journey or hopefully get on that journey just to know the why and what we do and how to keep going and strategies for just dealing with life and stresses and anxiety. And that's why I think all of the top level, high performing, successful people, almost all of them have, you know, practices of some movement in their repertoire, whether it's running or cycling. They've got some mindfulness practice, some mindset stuff, but almost all of them they have to have some kind of a movement to be a part of it, to feel whole, to keep them moving forward, to give them energy to fill their cup up. So, yeah.
It's so true, man. Movement creates clarity, and I've seen it firsthand in my life. And it's doing the action creates the thoughts that open up some change.
Yeah, I get most of my good thoughts and creativity on a not hard, intense run, but just like a kind of zone out and just get to that space, and all these different ideas start popping up. And there's some science to that of like what parts of your brain that it lights up, but it's just so therapeutic to just and creative process by just moving.
Yeah, it's a form of meditation, really, and it goes back to like if you zone in and zone out. So like an easy run, obviously, you're able to zone out and kind of just open up your mind.
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate your time, man. Thank you a lot. This learned a ton.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, brother.
Yep.